I hadn't been here very many days when I started learning about Dr. Guruge and his accomplishments, not only at University of the West, but really around the world. The more I learned, the more intrigued I was. But it wasn't until last May, right out here on the patio at commencement time, that I first had the opportunity to meet Dr. Guruge face to face and have a short chat with him. I realized I wanted to spend more time with this man. He knew the history of University of the West, but he knew so much more than just about University of the West. So I asked him if I might come for a visit at his Huntington Beach home. I arrived early in the morning, and he greeted me at the doorway in the hearty fashion that you can imagine Ananda Guruge would meet a guest. He ushered me into the living room. We sat on the sofas, and he gave me a short history of his life so that I could put that in perspective as we continued our conversations. And then he said, I think we should move into the dining room, to the table, where we'll be more comfortable. And at that time, of course, Mrs. Guruge brought me some refreshments, some tea, and we continued our conversation. A little while after we sat down at the dining room table, Dr. Guruge pulled out his agenda, and he said, I like to work with notes. And I thought, uh-oh. Dr. Guruge had many points that he wanted to discuss with me. He wanted to give me his insights about University of the West. He wanted to critique some of the things that we were doing, some of the changes that we had made. But as I talked with him, I knew he did that out of a love for the University of the West, for its students, for its traditions, and with an eye toward the future of this university. I enjoyed that visit very much, and as I left several hours later, he said, you must come again for dinner. I'm sorry that I never had that dinner with Dr. Guruge in his home, because I know that would have been an enjoyable event. But how thankful I am that I had those several hours to become acquainted with a person who is one of the important foundation stones of this institution and this community. He came first to University of the West as a guest speaker. He then joined the faculty, became chair of religious studies, and in 1998 became the dean of academic affairs. I've had a lot of experience with accreditation over the years in a number of institutions, and I cannot for the life of me imagine how Ananda Guruge achieved accreditation for this institution when he did. But as I talk to people here on the campus, they speak of him fondly as the father of accreditation. And they say things like he fearlessly led University of the West through the rigors, the hoops of accreditation. He was a charismatic diplomat. He practiced that during the accreditation process. He literally wrote policies overnight. We all know that WASC says, well, you must have a policy about this, and where is your policy about that? He literally would go home, come back the next morning and say, here's our policy, and hand it to the team. He jumped through those hurdles. It was the late Ken Locke who said Ananda willed accreditation for the University of the West, and I believe that is true. At the university, he was known as a champion of his students, a champion of humanistic Buddhism, a champion of whole person education. I asked some of his former colleagues, what was he like? What was he like to work with and work for? And as Dean Karam said, he was one of those bigger-than-life characters who comes across our paths every so often. He was a consummate diplomat. He was demanding. He had high expectations. Just as he was so productive himself, he wanted everyone around him to be productive too. He did have a photographic memory. He remembered the facts. He remembered the figures. He could look at a page and tell you what was on that page. But he could remember that many years later, and he used that. He had this inner He was efficient. He got things done quickly. He had a love for his family and an interest for his family that came across to everyone he met. He was a gifted storyteller, and he had a great sense of humor. And people say that not only was he interested in his family, but he was interested in your family as well. And he remembered the names of the members of your family, and he asked about them when he met you. When I talked to the students about Ananda Guruge, they said he was a great teacher. But more importantly, he was the teacher mentor that I think most teachers dream of being. He was able not only to challenge the students academically, but personally and with their own aspirations. And he used to say regularly, I just want what is best for the University of the West. That's the way I felt the day I had my conversation with him. His legacy at University of the West will live on in the history of this university. In the dreams and visions that we have, Ananda Guruge is that foundation stone on which we will continue to build. And he will remain the compass that will help point the way as we develop this university. And for all of us who had the opportunity to know him, some for much longer than I did, he will remain in our hearts and minds as one of those we'd like to be like him.